left off in Ayin Beis in Perik Yud Aleph. We started off discussing the Inyan that brought down over here. The Lashon is the Oisis Reshimu Loi Noga Behem Tzimtzum. The Hemshech HaInyanim is discussing here. On the one hand, it says that Atzilus is Gilui HaHelam, and on the other hand, it says that Atzilus is Yesh Mi'ayin, the Chachma Ma'ayin Timatzeh. This question you find in many places. The first way that the Reshimu Satan is explaining it over here is the difference between Oiris and Kelim. In other words, the first way he's answering it is that this, what you say that Atzilus is Gilui HaHelam, is benegeh to the Oir. The Oir is a hemshech from Lifnei Tzimtzum to the Kav, and from the Kav into the spheres of Atzilus. It's all one hemshech. It's all Gilui HaHelam. Masha'ein Kein, the Kelim of Atzilus. There's no Kelim Lifnei Tzimtzum. So Kelim when is Chadish la'achrei Tzimtzum. So when they get to Kelim, we can say that they're Be'ein Arich, they're like Yesh Mi'ayin. In the middle of Perik Yud Aleph, it says in the middle of this conversation, beforehand, in the next one we're soon going to see that he asks on that, he's not satisfied with that teretz. But when you get to the way he learns the teretz now, he adds on in the bracket in Perik Yud Aleph, we started this last time, that it comes out, let me just read the Lashon over here, it's in Perik Yud Aleph, in Imash Nisbail El Yuvan de Be'emes Yesh Yisrein Maila Bekelim Al Ha'eres. The Sheirish HaKelim Hein Me Reshimu, Shezehu Reishim Me Ha'ein Sof Shrifnei Tzimtzum, Ukmeshkosim Lokemacha the Ha'esis the Reshimu Loi Noga Behem Tzimtzum Klal. This Lashon, the Ha'esis the Reshimu Loi Noga Behem Tzimtzum Klal, is a big chiddush. You don't find such a Lashon in the Maimorim beforehand Bechlal. It's one of the chiddushim of the Rebbe, one of the big chiddushim of the Rebbe Marash. But just to demonstrate how big of a chiddush this is, I mentioned it briefly last time. There was a whole discussion, there was a whole vikuach between the Kopister and a Chassid who was trying to defend the Rebbe Marash, because this chiddush, which the Rebbe Marash wrote in a Hagor to Likutei Torah, says like this. There's a sefer which you may have seen been mitzuyin in the Ha'aras, Likutei Torah Legimul Parshiyos. Have you heard of such a sefer? Likutei Torah Legimul Parshiyos. The Rebbe Marash wanted to give out another Likutei Torah. We know we have Torah Oyer and we have Likutei Torah. Likutei Torah, why is it called Likutei Torah? Because Likutei Torah means that it's not just the Torah of the Alter Rebbe, it's malukit from different places as well, because there's also Hagos of the Tzemach Tzedek, he's malakit from other places as well. So it's Likutei Torah. But Torah Oyer is more or less the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe. Not the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe, it's the Maim of the Alter Rebbe without too many Hesofis. There are inside also Hagos from the Tzemach Tzedek. And what the Rebbe Marash wanted to do is he wanted to add on Hagos besides his father's Hagos. So he printed up, or he prepared for print, a sefer called Likutei Torah, and he only managed the first three parshas, Bereshis, Nechel, Mechlecha, so it was called the Likutei Torah Legimul Parshas. The Poila was printed in Tafresh Mem Daled, a year approximately after the Histalkos of the Rebbe Marash. Now, when this sefer was printed, it came out the Hagor of the Rebbe Marash, where he writes an answer to a shaila of the Tzemach Tzedek on a Maimah from the Alter Rebbe. The Maimah of the Alter Rebbe is in Parshas Noach, where the Maimah of the Alter Rebbe says that the Reshimu comes out is higher than the Oir, because the Oir Hakav is an Oir Tzimtzum, and the Reshimu, the Lashon of the Maimah is the Reshimu is Bechina HaKeleles. So it comes out the Reshimu is higher than the Kav. That's what it says in the Maimah of the Alter Rebbe's Maimah. On that there's a Hagor from the Tzemach Tzedek in a round bracket in Torah Parshas Noach, and there the Tzemach Tzedek says Tzorechir. You're saying that the Reshimu is a Bechina HaKeleles. The Kav is also a Bechina Klolis. How's it Klolis? The Kav is in all the Oymas, all the way down here. And the Kav is a Ha'orah from Lifnei Tzimtzum. It's an Oyer. And the Reshimu is only a Reshimu. What's the Reshimu? So how do you say that there's a Maila in the Reshimu that's Bechina HaKeleles? And there, the Tzemach Tzedek left it as a tzarech ir. At a later part, in a different Maimer, the Tzemach Tzedek does answer the tzarech ir, but at that point in Torah, he left it as a tzarech ir. On that, there's a Hagor from the Reb Marash. And the Hagor, the Reb Marash, writes, the Reb Marash writes in the Hagor, the Hagam Taka, the Reshimu, is what was left out after the Tzimtzum. But that itself proves that the Reshimu is higher than the oil. Let's use the Lashon of Reb Marash. He says, Omnam harishimu hu bilti tzimtzum klal. Sha'aremashin is samtzum adshlo nisha rak reshimu. That which was taken away through the tzimtzum. Hine oir shenoga behat tzimtzum nistalag l'tztadik. The oil that the tzimtzum reached moved to the side. Moving like a pshute, but it moved to the side. U'ma shenisha the bechinas harishimu hayrei ze oir shloi noga behat tzimtzum klal. She'im hoya magia tzimtzum gam ba'oir harishimu hoya gam ki mistalik. K'moy ha'oir shoy mamalet chilu makom achol. U'me'acha shenisha bechinas harishimu hayrei noga behat tzimtzum klal. This is the Lashon of Reb Marash. There's more to it, but that's the main Lashon. So it's a new Lashon, it's a new Chiddush, that the Reshimu is loy noga b'hat tzimtzum. The Koppester didn't like that at all. The Koppester, I'm referring to the son of the Maril. The Maril was the oldest brother of the Reb Marash. He wasn't the oldest, this is Baruch Shem was the older one, but from the brothers that became Rebbes, the first one, the oldest one was the Maril, Rabbi Yehuda Leib. And he actually was Nistalik only a year later after his father, Tafresh Chav Zayin. Maril was taken to Koppest, and there he had his following. He was seems a very dynamic leader, and he had lots of chassidim that went from Lubavitch to Koppest to listen to him. And the Reb Marash had not too many people left in Lubavitch at the beginning. And in Koppest, he said his own Maimorim, and he had his own Biurim, and he wrote a famous sefer called the Mogen Ovis, which is his Maimorim. There's a whole controversy about learning the Maimorim of the Mogen Ovis, but the Rebbe said clearly in Tafshin Lamed when he was Menachem Ovel the Rashag, so when he was Menachem Ovel the Rashag, the Rebbe said, as the Lashon is brought down in the Sefer HaMelech b'Mesiboy, where he says, see if I can find the Lashon. I can't find it now. So the Lashon Be'erech is Ze zanen Geschmacke Maimorim miyusaf from Tzemach Tzedek. That's what the Rebbe said, and he said something about the Frierdiker Rebbe was kilu mate and it's okay to learn the Maimorim of the Mogen Ovis. But upon him there, the Mogen Ovis, he writes his beer to this Hagor, and you can see that he definitely did not have this Chiddush of the Reb Marash. So, what was his way of learning? The way he learned the Inyan of the Reshimu is quite straightforward. If you look in the places that he's mitzayin in his letters, I forgot to say that after this came out, that the Koppester was very upset with this Hagor, there was a chassid called Tumarkin who wrote letters, 3 letters, to the Koppester, explaining to him why the Reb Marash is correct. And he didn't succeed too well with his letter. He didn't convince the Koppester. But you can see from the Shakur Vitalia what the problem was. And in the problem he writes like this: if you look in the Maimorim of Likutei Torah, how do you look at the Inyan of the Reshimu? What is the Reshimu? Even the meaning of the word Reshimu is, it's a Rishon that's left over. So the Oisis Reshimu, they're called Oisis Reshimu, is what's left over after the siluk of the oil. Does that show on a Maila on the Oisis Reshimu? Okay, the way you look at it, B'Pashtus, is these Oisis Reshimu are leftovers. It's a Rishon. Like when you write something, you rub it out, you leave a Rishon. A Rishon is not the etzem thing, so there's no Maila in the Reshimu. comes the Rebbe Marash and says, no, the fact that he stays in the Mokim Achol and the rest of the Oyer Sof had to leave, that means that Tzimtzum is strong enough to be pale as siluk of the Oyer Sof, whereas the Oisius can remain, means that they have something that the Tzimtzum could not touch. On the Lashon of Rebbe Marash, it's a bechina shalei noga bayat Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum couldn't touch it, couldn't even touch it. So the Fashteitzach, this is a big chiddush. Where does he get it from? What's the pshat? But the pele is that the Rebbe Marash doesn't only hold like that. He holds this two biurim. Beferish he writes in different Maimorim. There's two biurim in the Reshimu. There's the Pashto way of learning the Reshimu, and then there's this other way of learning the Reshimu, which is his chiddush. That the Oisis of Reshimu are taka only a Reshu, left over. That means it's a chisaron legabe the oyer. And it's a different way of another biur is he brings up a fair mind. But fi pashtus, Reshimu is only a Reshu. But every case, he's mechadish this other inyan of that the Oisis of Reshimu is loy nago behem Tzimtzum, they're higher. So let's briefly try and understand what does this mean that the Oisis of Reshimu are loy nago behem Tzimtzum. What does this mean? Well, first of all, we have to understand, we spoke about this in the previous period, what is the Reshimu? What does it mean, Oisis Reshimu? What is the teichen of this inyan? The teichen of inyan of Oisis Reshimu is the koyach hagvul shebein sof. Oyer sof is a gilui of koyach habli gvul, and the Reshimu is the gilui of koyach hagvul. Koyach hagvul, this is the two things on which the whole Seder Hishtalshlus is based. Gilui and Helen, Oiris and Kalim, Neshomis and Gufim, Hispashtus and Tzimtzum. These are the two Kavim Klolium that go through the whole Seder Hishtalshlus. There's a bit more of Gilui, there's a bit less of Helen. A bit more Helen, a bit less Gilui. And so it goes the whole way. But before the Tzimtzum, what was Nisgala? At that point, Lifnei Tzimtzum, the only thing that was Begilui was the Koyach HaGilui, the Koyach HaBlikvul. If you look at the Lashon in the Fidik Rebbe's Lashon in Tafshin Yud, in the Hemshech of Pasuk Legani, he writes that Kedem HaTzimtzum hoya his gabrus hablikvul. La'achar HaTzimtzum hoya his gabrus hagvul. In other words, what happened b'shas the Tzimtzum was a his gabrus of a new koyach. He was there the whole time because we have the klal. Kshem sheyesh lekoyach bebilti ba'al gvul, kach yesh lekoyach begvul. A Lashon that is brought down in many places from Seif HaVedas HaKodesh, that just like the Eibishter has a koyach in Bligvul, he has a koyach hagvul. So that equally, the Gabe Atzmus, both koyachas are equal. There's no mile on this over that. But Lapoel, the way the Eibishter was Megala, the koyachas is the first thing he was Megala is the koyach HaBligvul. And B'shas the Tzimtzum, he was V'napechu. He changed over who's going to be the main player in Seder Hishtalshlus. What happened B'shas the Tzimtzum was Nistalik the Bligvul, and it was Niskala a new koyach, the koyach hagvul, which is referred to by the Alter Rebbe as Oisis Reshimu. Oisis of the Reshimu. Why Oisis? Because Oisis is the union of Kalim, the Doimim, and they are Kalim to Oil. Now, when you masalik the Oil and Sof from the Oisis Reshimu, the Pashtas, what are you left with? If you're only left with Oisis, and it's called Reshimu, it's only a Roshim of what was before. So even if there is a shtichel oil left in the Oisius, it's going to be only a Roshim bilvad. It's going to be Ini Chitzoni. It's going to be nothing special about it. It's only a Roshim. The Rebbe Marash is being mechadish now that what? That in the Reshimu, there's bilti Tzimtzum. There's something that's higher than Tzimtzum. That's loy nago b'yat Tzimtzum. That can be learned in two ways. That can be understood in two ways. When he says that the Reshimu is loy nago b'yat Tzimtzum, is he referring to the Oisius themselves, or is he referring to the oil that's in the Oisius? And there's two ways of understanding it. You have different Maimonim which talk about it in different ways. If you're talking about the Oisius itself, that means the oil is taka less, the oil went away, and you're just left with Oisius. But if you look at the Lashon of the Hagor, the original Hagor, he writes, he doesn't just say that there's left the Oisius b'lit Tzimtzum. He says, Ve'im kein bechinas Reshimu hu bechinas hu oir habilti mit Tzimtzum klal. He says that there's oir in the Reshimu which is bilti Tzimtzum. It's not just that the oisius are there. Maybe the Tzimtzum doesn't want to take away the oisius. Maybe the Tzimtzum is not in. It doesn't matter that if you take away the oil and you're left with oisius. In other words, you're left with a bunch of kalim without any oil. So you might as well say you're left with nothing. Oisius and kalim without any oil is nothing really there. He doesn't say that. He says that in the oisius is oil bilti Tzimtzum klal. This is already a big chiddush. We mean this oil. The oil was just nistalic, wasn't it? You just said there was a Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means the oil was taken away. How can you have an oil which was not mitzumtzum, was not mistalik inside the oisius after you've just been mitzumtzum the oil? Doesn't even make sense what you're saying. How can you say there's oil built in tzimtzum when the whole inyan of the tzimtzum is to take away the oil? I must just add on one line that he adds on after the whole thing is done. When he says there's an oil built in tzimtzum, he says so there is oil inside there in the oisius of Reshimu, but it's behelim. If it's behelim, so we're back to square one. You might as well say there was a tzimtzum in the oil that was in the Reshimu. That's why it's behelim. Right, let me just repeat that question again. Now, the Rebbe Marash says that the oisius of Reshimu is oisius bilti tzimtzum. And he says the lashon that in the oisius is oil shaloi noga by hatzimtzum. Not just the oisius weren't touched by the tzimtzum, but inside the oisius there's an oil that loi noga by hatzimtzum. And he said, but it's behelim, kanoida. It's behelim, that means it is mitzumtzum. The whole tzimtzum is helim. What do you mean there's oil bilti tzimtzum, but it's behelim? So let me say there was mitzumtzum. So, to make it in short, the Mekudas Hadvarim, there's a whole arichas over here to explain on this, but to understand it in the most simplest of ways. The very fact that the Rabbeim, by the way, it doesn't say it clearly anywhere that the Reshimu is oisius. This the Alter Rebbe learned out from the Emek HaMelech, Yusud on the Emek HaMelech. It doesn't say it so clearly in Sifrei Kabbalah. The fact that the Alter Rebbe calls it oisius is what gives us to understand what the Rebbe Marash is saying. In other words, the shayrish of the Rebbe Marash is from the fact that the Alter Rebbe calls the Reshimu oisius a Reshimu, because that will give us to understand what it means that the oil was nistalik, and yet nevertheless inside the oisius there's an oil which is ne'elam and it's bilti tzimtzum. Let's take the oisius of the Reshimu. Let's take oisius of anything else. Forget the Reshimu for a second. Let's go to a simple thing. There's a Gemara with oisius. And there's one person who looks inside the Gemara, and he's very well versed in Shas, and when he sees these words, he understands, not just he understands Pirush Rashi, he can see inside the oisius of the Gemara, he can see Tosfos, he can see other Rishonim and Achronim, he sees it all lying within the letters of the Gemara. What are the oisius themselves? That's one person. Another person looks inside, he doesn't even know the taich. So what are the oisius themselves? Do they have the oil inside them or don't they have the oil inside them? So obviously you're going to say it depends who's looking inside the oisius. If you're coming from a point of view of Gilui, somebody who has the knowledge, as soon as he looks inside the oisius, he sees the whole Emek HaSeichel. If you come from the point of view of somebody who doesn't know anything, he sees the oisius, he doesn't see them. So what are the oisius themselves? The oisius themselves, having them the potential, they are noisa the haskolas which are in these oisius, which you can learn from these oisius, and that's why another person can read it and see it, because the oisius themselves are just the same thing as seichel, but they're just a different kav. Seichel is oil, but there's one way of giving oil. How can you give seichel over to somebody else on a piece of paper, for example, to someone else? You write down oisius. These oisius are kelim, which are noiseh the haskola. That means the haskola is hidden inside the oisius, and if you have seichel, you'll be able to take out from the oisius. You'll be able to take out the oil. In other words, the inyan of the oil inside the oisius is fully there. The whole difference is in what oifen is it there inside the oisius. Is it an oifen of giluim, or is it in an oifen of helam? Is it the oifen, the gedolim of oil, or is it the Gdorim of Oisius? The Gdorim of Oisius don't work on the same lines as oil. Oil works in oifen of Giluim. You see it, it's nimshech, it's mispashit, it's miskavitz, it's whatever happens to oil. Oisius is a different type of koyach, and that's one of the main hadgoshes we made all the way through. The Oisius work on a different frequency and a different type of oifen. Oisius don't work with Giluim. It's a koyach b'fnei atzma. It's not a hemshech of oil. Koyach have their own way of working. So the whole oil can be inside the Oisius, and it's beherlen not because there was a Tzimtzum, but because the way Oisius work is that it's a koyach nelam. Difficult to explain. Let me give a mashal gashmi. Agam is very magushim dik a mashal, but I'll give a mashal gashmi. Nowadays you have things which work on remote control. It says remote control. That the way it works is in a hidden way. You don't see the connection, but it's there and it's working, but it's in a hidden way. There's certain things which work, which begilu you don't see anything, but it works. Another mashal, which is shaykhs to our parsha. If you look at Rabbeinu Bachai in this week's parsha, he goes through all the avonim that were on the choshen, and he tells you the skula of each even. That this even with mashal, Yosef is Shoham or Yoshvei or one of those avonim. He says this even is like Yosef was his moitzechein be'enei his master. Is somebody who wears this even and he works inside Beis HaMalchus. He'll be neisechein, he'll be able to be pearl whatever he wants, because everybody will like him. All the important people in the palace will like him. Why? Because he's wearing an even. How does that work? It's like a remote control. It's having an effect, but in a doimim dika way. It's an even, right? It's not a gilui. It's not a shining light that comes along and you see. Oh, it works in a hidden way, in a remote way. And this even, another even, works other things. Certain avonim have different skulas. Every even had a different skula, and this is what all the avonim were in the choshen. Each shaykhs to each shavit with this particular even, he had this mile. So how is the even working? In a different way. It works different to a nefesh of a balchai or a nefesh even of a tzemeach. A nefesh of a balchai works with tnuah, with gilui. How do you know he's alive? He's moving around. But an even doesn't have that type of nefesh that moves around. So how is it? Where is the life force of this even? In a hidden way. It's a skula. It's an even avnei skula. It's an even that is poil around, but in a hidden way, in a ne'elam dika way. So he can have all the power he wants. Let's say it's a very strong even, it works very well. So it's a very powerful even, but you don't see any gilui. So it has everything inside them in an elam dika way. Mashal of even we punk mechuvim because Isis and Avonim is the same inyan. It's always brought down. Isis and Avonim is the same inyan. Isis is also the inyan of Avonim. They work on a different frequency. They work in a different way. Their oifen of having the oil itself is in an elam dika way. So the fact that the oil is ne'elam inside the Reshimu doesn't mean that it was touched by the Tzimtzum. It means that the oil was nisbatel to the koyach hagvul, to the koyach Reshimu. Instead of oil being in the gedorim of Giluyim, it now was niskaber, after the Tzimtzum was niskaber the koyach hagvul, and the oil became nichna to the koyach hagvul. Now everything works according to the koyach hagvul. So the oil and sof is there b'shlem musay, but it's nichna to the koyach hagvul. So what you see, begolu is avonim, you see oisius, but inside there, all you need is a chacham to look inside the oisius, he'll be able to take out the oil. And that's be'emes and what all Torah mitzvahs is. What are mitzvahs? Mitzvahs are kelim. That's actually what he talks about later on 9 Beis. Mitzvahs are kelim, and when you do a mitzvah, you're being ma'odah the shayrish of the mitzvah, which is the shayrish of kelim, which is in the Reshimu, and the Reshimu is able to draw out more oil, more giluyim. So after the Tzimtzum, both work together. You have a little bit of kelim and a little bit of oiras. But b'shas the Tzimtzum, what was the main chidush of the Tzimtzum? That was niskaba the koyach hagvul. So at that point, the oil and sof was nichlal into the koyach hagvul, ba'ofen ne'elam, but not because it became a tzimtzum is a behelim. It became a behelim because the koyach hagvul was niskaba. Not mitzad there was a tzimtzum. Now, in the oilam of Giluyim, the oil was mistalik. So if you ask somebody who's only into Giluyim, they'll tell you, oh, there's a tzimtzum over here, and the oil went away. That's in the oilam of Giluyim. So the oilam of Softaka suffered an inyan of tzimtzum, not about tzimtzum. But if you ask the oisius, What do they have with the Ein Sof? They'll say we have the whole Ein Sof, nothing changed for us. We have it in our way. What's the way the Oasis have it? Like Avon and Tavis. We have it in an Eif and Nelon. So the whole Ein Sof is there. L'may nafkimina, just like Oasis and Seichel. The Oasis themselves can be written in a language which you don't understand. Somebody who does understand this language and somebody who has Chochmah is able to extract from the Oasis and be Megala Ein Sof. The Megala Seichel and the Maila that means to be Megala Ein Sof. So that's basically the inyan of Oasis Reshimu Lo Naga Behem Tzimtzum, which is a Chiddush of the Marash, is based be'emerson on the very fact that the Alter Rebbe called the Reshimu, not Reshimu, because it doesn't say this in Kabbalah. The whole Lashon of Reshimu comes from where? It comes from the Hago, from the Ramaz, in Eitzes Chaim. That's how the Alter Rebbe brings down L'Kutei Torah. In Hisafos and Pashas Vayikra, it brings down, there's a Maimer Lahoven Mashakosa Eitzes Chaim B'Hagos Ramaz. That it says there was a Tzimtzum and Ein Sof, V'nisha Cholol L'Mokim Poni, on that there's a Hago from the Ramaz, he writes Cholol Lavdavka, Ki Nisha Reshimu. And it's based on the cloud that whenever there's Kedusha Lo Yizazim Im Kaimer, there's always a Roshim left. A Roshim, okay, fine. So what's a Roshim? Roshim is leftovers. It's a mark, it leaves its mark. So anything that was once Kedusha, once it goes away, it leaves a mark. That's all. But the Alter Rebbe was Masbir, based on the Emek HaMelech, which is a Chiddush, by the way, I should mention that as well, that the whole inyan of the Tzimtzum is brought down in Eitz Chaim. Who wrote the Eitz Chaim? Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital writes that you shouldn't look in any other Svarim, because he is the Talmud of the Arizal, and there's certain Mekubalim that wouldn't touch any other Sifrei Kabbalah. Only what Reb Chaim Vital wrote. He was the trusted Talmud, the Mamalamokim of the Arizal. But the Maisa was that before the Reb Chaim Vital came about, he became a Talmud, to become a Talmud of the Arizal. And by the way, the Arizal said beferish that he came down to be Mesakim in the Neshama of Reb Chaim Vital. He said that's why Taka, it turned out not so good in the end, because the Arizal was only 36 when he was Nistalik. And one of the sibas, it seems, that he was Nistalik was because he told once the Reb Chaim, if you need to understand anything, come to me. And that's my whole inyan. I came down to be Mesakim Yon Neshama, and he told him which Gilgul he was, and he'll answer him whatever question he has. So Chaim Vital used to cash in on that. But at one time, the Arizal said something, and Chaim said, explain it to me, I want to understand this. And the Arizal said, don't ask me to explain this one. So he said, he wasn't going to give up so easily. So he kept on asking. The Arizal said, you will regret asking me this. Don't push me. If you push me, I'm going to have to answer you, but you will regret it. The poet did push him, and that year was the Stalkos of Arizal. He had to explain it to him. He was the Stalk that year. So that's Reb Chaim Vital. But before Reb Chaim Vital came to the Arizal, there were other Talmidim of the Arizal. And one of them, or one of the Talmidim that was by the Arizal before Reb Chaim came along, was the Baal Sefer Emek HaMelech. The Baal Sefer Emek HaMelech, the Emek HaMelech was written, there's things in Emek HaMelech which you don't find in Eitz Chaim. And what's one of the things which is Nisbai in Emek HaMelech which is not in Eitz Chaim? The Reshimu. So there's some Kubalim that don't look in the Emek HaMelech. And the Rebbe said once in a Maimah that in Mezrich, if they wanted to learn something from the Emek HaMelech, they had to ask permission from the Maggid. You can't just learn Emek HaMelech ala Seder, Daf Yomi Emek HaMelech. You can't do that. You've got to learn only what the Maggid gave permission. And now we learn Shtikla from the Emek HaMelech, only what we find from the Hagos of the Tzemach Tzedek. As we know, the Tzemach Tzedek is always finding Mara Mekaymis for everything. So he finds Mara Mekaymis for lots of things in the Emek HaMelech, so that's what we can learn. But Stam ala Seder is not the advised way of learning Emek HaMelech. When it comes to the Reshimu, Alter Rebbe in L'Kutei Torah, there in that Maimon, and in other places, he says that V'inyan HaReshima eina mavur be'Eitz Chaim, rak be'Emek HaMelech mavur inyan zeh, and he goes ahead and brings from the whole Emek HaMelech, the whole inyan of the Reshimu, the Oisius, and the Olam HaMalbush. I don't know if we mentioned before the Olam HaMalbush, that's brought down later on over here. Shemina Tzeres Hain Gilbert brings down the Olam HaMalbush, we'll maybe get to that another time. These things, Olam HaMalbush and Oisius and Reshimu, is something that's not brought down in Emek HaMelech, in Eitz Chaim, only in Emek HaMelech. But if you look in L'Kutei Torah, he brings down the Emek HaMelech, and then he says, V'zeu Masha Kosa Be'Eitz Chaim. In other words, he ties it in, and he's metavech between the Emek HaMelech and the Eitz Chaim. So, based on that, it makes sense to say that the fact that the Alter Rebbe referred to the Oisius and Reshimu as Oisius, that itself was the mocker for the Rebbe Marash to be mechadish this chidush that the union of the Isis and Reshimu is lo yinoga behema tzimtzum. Once you get into the whole musig of Isis, which we just said briefly now as al derech avonim tavius, so that was just a moshul, by the way. It's not. It doesn't say anywhere that as a moshul, but based on other places, avonim and Isis is the same thing. It would make sense. I mean, Sefer Yitzirah says that shnei avonim, b'nei shnei batim. And what's a marshal on Isis? So it would make sense to use it as a marshal. But I'll call upon him based on the fact that the Alter Rebbe called them Isis. From that, the Alter Rebbe Marash was mechadish. It's tacher chidush, but it's based on that inyan. Anyway, that was just a Hagor in page Yud Aleph of the Hemshech of Ein Beis. And at Mitzvah Hashem next time we'll go further into the next Maimon, which is Pashas Nosei. What's more important is it would be very important for those who learn Takal Seder at Ein Beis to learn well the Maimon of Shlach, because there is the main, should we say, the hinge on what is based the whole Hemshech, the whole Chidush of the Hemshech of Ein Beis.